Hey everyone, I'm Brian from All Day Ruckoff here, and in this podcast episode, you've got me talking about 3 different things. Get into that in a second. This I'm recording towards the end of July. I actually recorded this podcast at the beginning of July, but due to how crazy things have been around my house and just my day-to-day life, this podcast did not come out until probably the last week of July. So I'll get into all that in the podcast, but I just want to say thank you so much for the support. And here's the podcast I recorded for the start of July, but now it's the end of July. Hey everyone, Brian from All Day Ruckoff here. And in today's podcast episode, we're going to be talking about goal setting, priorities, and being present. This podcast is airing at the beginning of July. We're halfway through 2020. Kind of hard to believe that we're halfway through 2020. I mean, this year has been crazy for just a huge number of reasons. And I feel really weird when I look back at the first half of this year. Half of me can't believe that the year is already halfway over. And half of me can't believe that the year is only halfway over. I feel like so much has happened in these first 6 months. And at the same time, when I look at my goals, I feel like nothing has happened. The goals that I had planned for this year, most of them up in smoke with COVID-19 canceling races, canceling events, especially in the Washington State area. That's where I live, north of Seattle. Everything. I have events out in September that have all been canceled. Nothing is happening out here. And so it's interesting to look at that list, look at the things that I thought I could accomplish, and then kind of have them all disappear. So we're going to talk about goal setting in that whole regard, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are not going to be kind of hitting the goals that they were hoping to hit this year. We're going to talk about priorities, kind of shifting priorities, family priorities, that kind of stuff. And then finishing it off with being present. And even if you are listening to this in the future, the goal stuff is going to be hopefully helpful if you run into something like this. Hopefully that we don't run into anything like this again in the future. But if something happens in your life and you have to reprioritize goals, then hopefully you can use some of the information here. But that being present thing, that's something that I've struggled with, as long as I can remember. So hopefully you're able to take some awesome stuff away from that, or at least something slightly useful. You're listening to the All Day Ruckoff podcast, episode number 162. Thank you so much for downloading this episode. Thank you so much for the support. We're just going to dive right into this thing. We're going to start with goal setting, altering goals, that whole fun deal that I'm sure a lot of people are doing. We're going to talk about priorities, and then we're going into happiness and being present. So to start off, goal setting, that's something I do every year. And generally, I check in with my goals, figure out what I need to do to finish them, where I'm coming up short, what I need to do to accomplish the goals that I'm coming up short. Rarely do I look at my list of goals and say, wow, this is not happening. And that's exactly where I'm at this year. Some of my goals for this year included qualifying for the Boston Marathon. I wanted to qualify myself. I wanted to, actually, it's kind of a fun story. My mom turned a certain age this year where her marathon time to qualify for the Boston Marathon kind of went up the next bracket into something that is really obtainable for her. So we had been talking about this. She had a friend who qualified for Boston, was planning on going this year. Obviously, it's canceled this year. They're doing the virtual race. But she had been talking about this, how she wanted to qualify for Boston. And I said, that sounds awesome. Why not train up for another marathon? I've done that in the past. I can do it again. And I'll pace you for a marathon and make sure that you're going to qualify. I'll watch the times, make sure everything's good, and we'll have a ton of fun doing this. I like spending time with my mom. And so I thought that would be a lot of fun. After a couple days of thinking it, looking at the times that I would need to qualify, I was going to train a lot and surprise her by hopefully qualifying as well so we could do the trip together. I really, really buckled down on training. I've been running a lot of miles. If you follow me on Strava, then you probably see them. With COVID hitting, some of them, 20-mile runs on the treadmill, just awful stuff. But all of it with the idea that at the end of this, I'll be able to run probably a 2:55 marathon, qualify for Boston. My mom's going to qualify. I can surprise her and tell her that, my time's good enough as well. And then hopefully we could do this fun trip together. So that's where that whole goal came from. But obviously, with all events being canceled, at least in my area, Washington State, I signed myself up for 3 marathons this year because I wanted to give myself a couple chances to qualify. It's a fast time I'd have to hit. So I wanted to make sure that, if I really screwed up the first one in June, that I would have time for the September one to kind of fix my training. So I signed up for 3. One of them I was going to pace my mom in. The other 2 I was going to run solo. And all 3 of those, even the one mid-September, have been canceled. So that goal for 2020, gone, right? Like that's not going to happen this year. So when I look at goals like this that are on my list, obviously I still want to train, I still want to run because I want to accomplish this goal in the future. That's one of the first things I ask myself. Is this a goal that I can't accomplish because of laziness, because of, will, desire? Is this something that I just don't really want to do or just don't feel like doing or it's too hard? Or is this a goal that I can't accomplish because of some external factors like COVID-19 wrecking a lot of stuff for us in the endurance sports community? This one is still one I'm very passionate about. So I know it's not will. I know it's not desire. I know it's something I still want to do. It's all because of COVID. So, it's a goal that I'm good removing from my 2020 list, pushing it to 2021 and seeing what's going to happen there. And when I write down my goals, I take them seriously because they're things that I've been thinking about. And, I wrote this down at the beginning of January 2020. So it was really important to me then. And so I definitely want to give my January 2020 self the respect, the person who wrote it down then, and not just kind of throw it off to the wayside. So that one's going to 2021 because it's not possible for me to complete in 2020. If this was a goal that I just wasn't passionate about, for example, it turns out I don't actually like spending time with my mom. I think this trip would be terrible, and I've made a terrible mistake even thinking this was a good idea, then I'll start doing some analysis there. Why did I think this was a good idea in January, and why don't I think it's a good idea now? Kind of write down the reasons, the things that shifted, because there had to have been some mental flip there, right? Between January 2020, when I was super excited and wrote this down on a piece of paper saying, I'm going to do this year, and a goal that, I'm just not thrilled about anymore. This one's kind of a bad example because it's something that I'm, still excited about, but let's say the goal is something else. Something that you were very excited about in January. Maybe I just bought a bike. You've got all these memories about riding bikes as a kid, going on adventures, just having a ton of fun, because that's something that, I've got awesome memories of when I was a kid, just kind of grabbing the friends, grabbing our bikes and just going out and just having a great time. So you buy this bike and your goal is to ride it 1,000 miles in 2020. And you've ridden 200 miles so far. And it turns out that you actually don't like riding bikes anymore. Like that was really fun when you were a kid, but it sucks now. Every time you pull that bike out, like you're dreading it because you just don't have any fun. So halfway through the year, kind of reevaluating our goals, you're probably looking at that goal and you're saying, man, bike 1,000 miles this year. I've put 200 on it. I have to bike 800 more miles this year, and I hate biking. This sucks. I do not want to finish this goal. So there's really 3 scenarios in my head on how this goal can end up. 1, you can gut it out get those 800 miles in, finish the goal. At the end of the year, you can check it off. Awesome job. Probably feel pretty proud of accomplishing it. Maybe you've learned to love riding, but there's always that chance that you just hated every second of it and it felt like wasted time. Because I've definitely had goals like that in the past where I just out of pure stubbornness kept them around because I said I was going to do them. And so here I am doing them, even if my interests have completely changed. The second way this thing can end up, you can try to get those 800 miles in, not hit the goal, and then you're just kind of in a weird spot where you didn't complete this goal. You didn't have fun trying to complete this goal. Maybe you're happy you didn't complete it. I don't know. It's a weird spot to be in where you don't complete a goal that you didn't end up caring about. And that's usually a good sign when I'm looking back at my goals. If I complete one and I'm not excited, then was it something that I really cared about? And the flip side is if I didn't complete one and I really don't care, then why was it a goal to begin with? Should I have removed it? Should I have replaced it? Why is it still around taking up mental space in my head when, clearly it's not impacting me for the better? And the third way that this can kind of shape up, it's something I've been doing more recently. I guess as I get older, I realize I don't have infinite years left to complete goals. When I was in my 20s, I definitely thought I had all the time in the world. As I get older, I realize that's not the case. So sometimes when I do these check-ins, I'll replace a goal. And so this goal, the example, ride 1,000 miles on a bike in a year, I really don't want to finish it. I'll replace it with something that I'm passionate about, excited about, and is in the same category. So riding the bike 1,000 miles, that's arguably a physical goal with a mental component. It takes, physical endurance to ride your bike 1,000 miles in a year. Mentally, that's a big number. And again, this kind of story is you're just getting back into riding. I know there are people who ride 1,000 miles in a month, but we're going to pretend that this is a big number for me. So I'll replace it with something that's similar. Maybe you just found out about rucking this year. So you could replace that with a rucking goal where halfway through the year, maybe you want to ruck 400 miles by the end of the year. Maybe you want to hit a certain ruck time, a certain ruck weight. You're excited about rucking. You're not excited about riding. Personally, I'm totally fine with switching those goals in after I've done some analysis. So the first thing I'll do is I'll write down the reasons why I want to get this goal off my list. Goals are supposed to be tough. They're supposed to challenge you. Is this goal just something that I think is too hard? And so when I'm writing down the reasons why I want it gone, I'm looking for those kind of signs where maybe I just don't think I'm going to finish it. And so I'm subconsciously trying to get it off my plate. And that's honestly no good because if it's a goal that's important to me, then it should still be there. But if the reasons I'm writing down are every time I look at the bike, I get this horrible feeling in my stomach. I think of how much I'm going to dread getting on it, and not the good dread where you kind of dread waking up at 5 a.m. to go on a long ruck. And then, you start smiling halfway through and you get back and you have an awesome rest of your day. But that dread that nothing good is going to come from this, there's definitely a difference between those two types of dreads. So I'd write down that. I'd write down, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I thought I was going to enjoy it, which is why I wrote this down to begin with, but it turns out I hate riding bikes. So once I've compiled that list, I've looked it over, I've made sure that I'm not just getting rid of it because 1,000 miles is a lot and I don't want to fail something this year. That's when I'll cross it off and replace it with a goal that's, like I said, similar in nature, but different. So maybe you found out that rucking, that's new for you this year. Maybe open water swimming. You've never swam before, but you've got a buddy who's gotten into it. He invites you out. You have a ton of fun, and that's what you want to focus on. Replace it with that kind of a goal. Like I've mentioned, goals are supposed to be tough. They're supposed to be challenging, but really they should be fun and they should make you excited about where you're going with yourself. And once you complete them, you should feel like you've accomplished something and that you're bettering yourself in the direction that you want to go, because that's something that you actually care about you'll get a similar payoff as you would doing the biking goal, but you'll be so much happier. Life's too short to do all this stuff you don't like. And I'm sure there are people out there, because I know there are, who don't have the same, thoughts that I do with goal setting. That if you set the goal, like I said, then you have to finish it, or else you're a quitter. I don't know. I think if you replace it with something like for like, then you're still completing the spirit of the goal, but you're just doing it in a way that you're actually going to enjoy. And so maybe you haven't thought of goal setting that way before, and maybe you'll have a better end of this year because you can replace some of those goals that you set with something that you actually care about. So we've talked about goals that are impossible to complete for the remainder of the year. We've talked about goals that we don't care about anymore for the remainder of the year. Both of those are examples of adapting your goals to evolving circumstances. Shout out to my buddy Derek Hill for that quote right there. I mean, there's times in your life when you have to adapt your goals. You have to change your goals. I set goals. A lot of other people do too on a yearly calendar, but really that's just a giant group of days. And, there's nothing really special about the next group of days, except that it's just more days. So when I look at it that way, I don't really feel bad pushing goals off, changing my goals, because I know when I do it, I've done the analysis and I know that it comes from a spot that I'm still trying to improve on, the things I'm working on. And as long as I have those left and right bumpers, left bumper being COVID-19, something comes that's completely outside of your control. Right bumper being, I just really don't care about this goal anymore. And I feel like that I'm able to keep a solid set of goals that I'm excited about. I mean, this is your life. You should be excited about your goals. Otherwise, what's the point in those goals? You should have goals you're excited about. The next thing we're going to talk about is shifting priorities. Sometimes you just need to take a step back and look at your situation and say, yeah, something's got to change. I know a lot of people went through that when things were shutting down for COVID-19. I had a similar phase I went through with that. My daughter, who went to daycare, stopped going to daycare. My son, who was in kindergarten, stopped going to kindergarten. My wife, who went to work, stopped going to work. All of a sudden, my house is a lot busier during the day than it was before. A lot louder, a lot more going on. I had a set of goals on how many videos I wanted to shoot for All Day Ruckoff. I love shooting videos. I think they're a lot of fun. I love 99% of the comments and feedback I get on them. And it's something that I'm not great at. And so I like to improve on it. It's something that I see a space that I can definitely work towards and improve there. The thing with shooting videos is that you need a quiet space for it to happen. And the way I shoot my videos is they're usually 10 to 20 minutes long, doing gear reviews, doing packing lists. It's really tough to get 10 minutes, even in my house, 5 minutes of quiet time where there isn't someone yelling, someone talking. And, as of recently, so as I mentioned, 2 kids now home, my wife's home, we've brought in 2 foster kids who are living with us now, who are both under the age of 5. So I've got 4 children in my house right now who are 6 and under. Quiet time does not happen. And so that's a great example of, priority shifting, where I've got to take a step back and look at what's going on around and say, where are my priorities here, right? 5 months ago, my priorities were producing videos. Now, am I going to try and go out there and yell at 4 kids to get them to be quiet for half an hour so I can shoot this video? No, that's not where my priorities lie. And I'm actually in the process of building an office right now, which has been a ton of fun. So talking about goals, that's the one goal for 2020 that's actually might happen and is sticking through, is building this office. But the priority is not to yell at children, it's to have a happy house. And so just being honest with myself on what I can accomplish, what it takes to accomplish these things, looking at family obligations, priorities,
and kind of reassessing what I want to accomplish is important. And so that's a bunch of things about myself. Your situation's probably different. Probably don't have 4 kids, age 6 and under, running around your house, but you might have 3 or 2 or 1, or you might have other things that have changed priority wise. But, with everything that's going on, it never hurts to take a step back, look at what your priorities are, look at where your focus should be. Because, this is a rucking podcast. A lot of people who listen to this are really into, physical challenges, physical events. You have to start asking yourself during times like this where a lot of people are struggling, it might be yourself struggling, or it might be a family member who lives in your house struggling. How much of a priority are these events? Is this training versus is this family? I've still been able to get a lot of my training in, even with all these kids, but I've had to change the times up that it happens. And I've noticed that as I've been changing the times, I've been spending less time with my wife. And so I'm on a weekly basis kind of just stepping back, looking at where my time is being spent, where my priorities are, because by the time we've got the 4th kid down, then I go out for an hour run, get back, shower. It's 10 o'clock. We have maybe 20 minutes to hang out, and then it's off to bed and kind of rinse and repeat. Kids are up at 5:30 in the morning, and it's game time. That's just a giant roundabout way of saying that generally I look at my priorities on like a quarterly basis, but with all the uncertainty going on right now, with all the emotion, with all the feelings that people have, whether you have them or don't, people in your household might. And so you just have to kind of step back on a more frequent basis and just check in, see how everyone's doing, see how you're doing, and adjust accordingly. The final thing I want to talk about is being present. And this is something that I have struggled with for years. The big issue I have personally, and you might not have this issue, or you might have this issue in the same way, a different way, is that I'm always looking for the next thing. When I was in high school, it was always the next year. Next year, this year sucks. Next year's going to be awesome. When I was in college, my freshman year, I was like, living on campus sucks. Next year's going to be awesome. The following year, I started dating a girl who, became my wife now, but she lived 2 hours away. And I kept saying, college is a lot of fun, but it kind of sucks how far away. It's going to be so awesome when we live in the same city together. And then I graduate, move down into the Seattle area. We live in the same city together. And I kept thinking, this is awesome, but it's going to be so awesome when we're married. And then we got married. We moved into an 880 square foot condo. And I was like, this is awesome, but it's going to be so great when we have a house. A house is going to be really cool. We started fostering in the condo, and we got a dog in the condo. And that 880 square feet became pretty small pretty quick. We moved to a house. The house was in a decent area, not the best area, not really too many trails near it. It's an awesome house, but it wasn't perfect. And so then it was, this house is great, but we both knew it was not our forever home, like the house that we wanted to live in forever together and raise a family in. And we kept saying, this is great, but it's going to be so great when we have our forever home. And it's crazy to look back because I have all these awesome memories of high school, college, moving down into the Seattle area. Living within driving distance of my fiance at the time, getting married, living in the condo, all these awesome memories. But then I also remember kind of feeling like there was always that next step. And I always had that thought, this is great now, but it's going to be so great when. And COVID-19 has just brought that right back, where everything's good now, but it's going to be so great when I can go do GoRuck events again, when we can do giant Ruck Club meetups, when I can start doing races again, qualify for Boston. And I find myself now, because I've been doing, a lot of reflecting with goal setting and all this stuff, looking back over previous years, kind of seeing this pattern that I get caught up in. because I'm, happy right now, but I'm gonna be so happy when I can go to Go Work events again. It's just taking a quick minute to stop and say, that's going to be great, but right now is also great because I'm in a super unique position where my entire family's at home. This is probably never going to happen again. I mean, knock on wood, this never happens again. And we're all stuck at home together, not being able to go outside, have to wear masks everywhere, can't go to parks, but, kind of trying to make the most of this really unique experience, finding the fun in it and kind of pausing on looking forward to those other events and just being happy, content, and present. So I don't know if you have those feelings where it's always that, things are good right now, or it might even be for you, things suck right now and they're going to be so great when, because that can totally be the case as well. But it seems like the future's always going to be better and the present doesn't matter so much. But then, looking back on the past, it's like those are the moments. So, been doing a better job of finding joy in the current, still thinking about the next thing, but not at the same level like I used to. So, if you're someone who has struggled with that in the past, maybe take a, 5-10 minutes, think about those feelings, think about times in the past you've had them, and think about ways that you can kind of use the current situation to work on them. Because I know personally, when this whole thing's over, we're able to come back to events, we're able to do all of our stuff again. I want to come back stronger than I was before. I want to be a better athlete, a better person post-COVID than pre-COVID. I don't want this to be like purgatory time for me, where I kind of came into it and then I leave just like this older version of the same self that I was, because that's an easy trap to fall into. So hopefully you've been thinking about this whole time in kind of a similar way, where you're going to come out at the other side, stronger. And that might not be physically, it might be mentally, it might be, stronger family bonds. It might be emotionally stronger. There's a lot of ways that you can leave stronger that don't involve a lot of sandbag workouts, a lot of rucks, but just kind of coming out the other end of this, a better overall person. That's my goal. And hopefully if you haven't thought about that, then you can think about that, consider it, and see where it takes you. Thank you so much for downloading the All Day Ruckoff podcast. This has been episode number 161. I wanted to have this episode last week because that was kind of the halfway point through the year, but that episode with David, that was a really personal episode for me. And so I didn't want to hold it up. I wanted to get it out there. I hope you enjoyed that one with David Ray about wrecking with Parkinson's. And I hope you enjoyed this one as well. It's definitely been a crazy year. Like I said at the beginning of this, I feel like so much has happened and I feel like nothing has happened. So much in the world, has gone on. I can't believe everything that's happened has just been compacted into this 6-month span. But at the same time, looking at my goals, looking at events, I feel like nothing's happened, especially towards the beginning of it when everything was 2-week lockdown, 4-week lockdown, 6-week lockdown, school's canceled. This might go through summer. Let's talk about modified September school. It keeps going. And that's one of the reasons that whole it keeps going thing that I wanted to touch on, that happiness and being present, because at the beginning of this, it was so easy to say, man, this is going to be done in 2 weeks. I remember in March when things started shutting down, my wife and I had plans to go away on a week-long trip in the end of April, and we were saying, of course, this will be cleared up by then. Of course. There's no way this is going to last 6 weeks. And here we are. Then we get into June, things are still crazy, and we're saying, all right, maybe end of June, not going to happen, but August. We'll do it, around our birthdays. We'll go on this trip in August. Definitely going to happen. And here we are in July. It's not happening in August. We're talking sometime 2021 maybe? I don't know. but it was just so easy to get in that in 2 more weeks, everything will be better. In 2 more weeks, everything will be better mindset, and just kind of getting out of that mindset and saying, how can I enjoy this moment the best, to the best of my abilities? And when COVID's over, I'll enjoy COVID being over. Absolutely. But in Washington State, everything's very much, for the most part, closed up. So I'm going to enjoy my life as much as I can within the constraints of the current environment. And making that mental shift really boosted my outlook on the whole situation. So hopefully you got some good takeaways out of that. If you enjoy the All Day Ruckoff podcast, you can always leave a review, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you downloaded this thing. If you want to support it financially, there's the online store, alldayruckoff.com/store. And then if you want to support beyond that, there's Patreon, patreon.com/alldayruckoff. Let's go some bonuses, some behind the scenes stuff. If you're curious about that office I'm building, which I briefly mentioned in this episode, I've got a couple posts up there with a bunch of pictures. It is going to be awesome. Super excited about it. I'm building it with my father-in-law. We've done 95% of the work ourselves, all the concrete, a bunch of the wood, the framing. It's going to be 2 stories in certain sections. It's big. It's really cool. Excited about it, learning a ton because that's not where my expertise is at all, and having a lot of fun. Thank you so much again for downloading this episode. Thank you for all the support, and don't forget, attitude is everything. Keep yours positive, and thank you again for tuning in.